Hello, good evening and welcome to this episode of Biz First in Focus here on TV1. I am Shahin Jurang Party. Well, the government of Sri Lanka has laid out an array of measures and plans to improve the country's economy. Well, what is the driving force for this to achieve these goals? Well, several experts opine that the labor force and the labor market is the most important driving factor. And to talk about this, we are joined by the head of Labor and Human Resources at the Institute of Policy Studies, Nisha Arnatilaka. Hello, Nisha. Welcome to the show. Nisha, you all have published a report on these matters. Could you just talk briefly about this report?
Yes, because the present government want to increase double per capita income by 2025, and also it has reiterated creating 1 million jobs. So this year's state of the economy, we focused on labor markets and growth. Now, if you look at labor markets, you can't think of labor market in Sri Lanka the way you looked at it in the 90s or the 80s, because we are no longer a low-income country, we are a middle-income country. So we can't compete based on just cheap labor. We need to be more sophisticated, be more productive and more efficient. And in order to do that, now the Global Competitiveness Report looks at precisely how countries can be more competitive. And in terms of that, Sri Lanka is 71 out of 138 countries. But in terms of labor market efficiency, we are 128 out of 138 countries. That means we are among the lowest 11 countries. And why is that the case? There are two main reasons. One is the hiring and firing in Sri Lanka is very difficult. So we don't have a very good score for that. The other factor is the inequality in the labor market because of low labor force participation of females. That is, the proportion of females who are in the labor force are very low in Sri Lanka.
Is this a fault within the government sector or the private sector, would you say?
This is overall in the country. So actually things that the government policies on providing jobs and private sector job creation, how efficiently they create jobs, all of that comes into play when you talk about the labor force participation of. So that is the proportion of people who are in the labor force of the population.
Nisha, you spoke about, in terms of flaws in the country, you spoke about firing and hiring. That's one of the main causes in the labor force. Is this due to a flaw in the Termination of Workmen Act of 1971? Does it need to be upgraded right now?
Yeah, it is a little old. And then if you compare the severance pay, that is the amount of money a company has to give a worker when a worker is laid off, it's very high in Sri Lanka. If I give you an example, a worker who has been working for 20 years, to terminate a worker like that, in Sri Lanka you have to pay 39 months worth of wages to that person. The average for Asia is just 16 months of wages. And for OECD countries, it's about 6 months of wages. So it's very high in Sri Lanka. And not only that, I think the termination itself, there are a lot of ambiguities and it takes a long time. So it's not easy to hire and fire workers. Now this creates a lot of distortions in the labor market. For example, when it is difficult to lay off a worker, a company would think twice before hiring a worker. So because of this reduces job creation, because unless you are very sure that a person is going to be good and productive, a company will not hire a worker. And also it has created a lot of informality in the labor market. You see, if you look at the labor force survey data, the casual workers and contract workers, the share of those kinds of workers are increasing. This is also because of this problem of hiring permanent workers, because then you can't adjust the workforce. Now, unlike before, because of technology, you need workers with new skills, and also when there are economic fluctuations, you have to adjust your workforce. So those kind of flexibilities are not there because of this high cost of hiring and the lengthy procedures involved in firing. So I think if you improve on that, you can introduce more flexibility into the labor market.
Would you suggest that hiring more youth employees is the way to go at the moment?
I think it is important for the youth to get involved in the labor market from a very young age, because unless they have that experience, they won't be good workers when they are in their middle age. At the moment, it is not easy for youth to get into good jobs, and that is also partly because of these problems in creating jobs. Because of this problem of not being able to fire workers easily, workers tend to be in jobs for a long period. So for newcomers to the labor market, like the youth or females who go off the labor market and want to rejoin, for those people it is harder to find good jobs. So
Nisha, we spoke about Sri Lanka's ranking in the Global Competitive Index, and it says Sri Lanka is ranked 71st.
Yeah.
However, despite that, Sri Lanka has fared poorly in the labor market over the past couple of years. Could you describe extensively why?
There are a lot of reasons. Our labor market is not very sophisticated. Now, because we are a middle income country, we need to think about better jobs and more efficient, productive jobs and better paying jobs. So because we don't have that, a lot of the better skilled workers are leaving the country, looking for jobs outside. And also because of the labor market is not flexible, you have the informality is quite high in the country. It's like about 60% of the employed are informal workers. So that means they don't have the social protection, they don't have good pay. So because of that, their productivity goes down. So unless these things can be improved, you can't improve the efficiency of the labor market. Now, if you look at the OECD countries, the share of highly skilled workers, those are called science and technology workers. They are professionals or semi-professionals. Usually you need a degree or a tertiary level vocational training to do those kind of jobs. Now in the OECD countries of the labor market, about 40% are these science and technology workers. But in the case of Sri Lanka, it's only 13%. So you need those workers to create new jobs also. Say, unless you have a manager, for example, of a hotel, you can't have that hotel and hire other workers. So those workers are very important. Now, this government is talking about creating 1 million jobs. I think that is a very good thing. But rather than just looking at the number of jobs, you have to also look at the quality of the jobs. I think. What kind of jobs do we need to create? We need to look at that. And I feel we need to emphasize on creating more science and technology jobs. That means jobs for better skilled workers. Unless we do that, I don't think we can improve the efficiency of the labor market and improve wages for everybody. So,
Nisha, while holding on to the thought on the 1 million jobs being created in Sri Lanka, over the past couple of months, if I'm not mistaken, the government of Sri Lanka, several high-profile ministers, politicians, invited those who have left the country to come back to Sri Lanka, saying the economy in the country is now stable and that there are several job opportunities. Do you think Sri Lanka is in fact stable, and do we have the economic atmosphere to provide jobs to these high-skilled labor?
So the high-skilled workers don't only look at the jobs alone. For example, to bring back those workers, you need to have the jobs, and you need to have those jobs paying high wages. But usually they are family units, not individual workers. So you need to have the rest of the country environment also doing well. One other area where we are not doing too well is the education sector. Because those workers will look at, okay, where will my children go to school, where will they go to university if they come. So a lot of the workers who are leaving the country are leaving the country not only because of the jobs, but they are looking at their families and the education of the children and those things. So I think those things will also need to improve if you are to bring these highly skilled workers.
Nisha, is the inefficiency in terms of the labour market holding back Sri Lanka, has a tight grip on it in terms of competitiveness as a business, investment and a commercial destination?
Yeah, I think so, because a lot of the company, I mean, there are a lot of labour shortages in the country. That means the workers that the country is producing are not skilled to take up the jobs that are available. So there is a skills mismatch. So we need to improve and reform the education sector so that we produce the sort of workers that are in demand in the market now. This is not happening at the moment. And also we need these highly sophisticated managers and high-level workers to create other jobs, create jobs for other types of like not so highly skilled workers. So at least that changes. I don't think that...
Nisha, how have regional and developed countries improved their labour efficiency and competitiveness compared to Sri Lanka?
So actually a lot of the countries had this kind of severance pay system prior to 1980s. But from late 1980s, starting from the OECD countries, they changed that, because at the moment a company is responsible for paying a worker compensation when a person is laid off. But in those countries, it is not the company. It is actually, there is a fund, and the companies contribute towards that fund. And companies are able to hire and fire workers when workers are unemployed. That fund pays unemployment wages for those workers up to a certain time, like usually about 6 months. And during that time, they are provided with training and they are provided with help to find new jobs. So that creates efficiency, because then workers are moving around and they will find jobs that are best suited for them. At the moment in Sri Lanka, once you enter a job, you are there for a long period. Yeah, stagnant. So when it is stagnant, then there is no improvement.
So is the mentality of Sri Lankans, or is it just the way the system has been created?
I think because the system has been there for a long time now, people also want to have lifetime jobs. And
let's compare with countries like Singapore, countries close to us, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam and Hong Kong. How have they achieved high ranking in this regard? How have they proceeded forward in compared to Sri Lanka?
So I'm actually not quite familiar with the severance pay systems in all those countries, but I must mention 2 countries, Chile and Australia. Because actually for a country like Sri Lanka, we can't have the kind of systems that the OECD countries have, because our administratively those kind of systems are not very easy to for example, when a person is unemployed, I don't think in Sri Lanka we can monitor to see, for the 6 months whether that person is still unemployed and make payments to that person. But in Australia and Chile, they have a hybrid system, which is more suited for countries like Sri Lanka, where our administrative system is not very sophisticated. So I would say we should go for a system like that, where this allows the companies to be more flexible in their hiring and firing, but also provide some compensation for the workers. And most importantly, give them training and opportunities to find jobs that are better suited for them. Because at the moment we have the wrong person doing the wrong job, and the whole country is being held back because of that.
Well, Nisha says we have the wrong person doing the wrong job. Well, to talk more about this, we are going to have to cross over for a short commercial break. Stay with Base First in Focus. We are joined by Nisha Arunatillaka, Head of Labour and Human Resources at the Institute of Policy Studies. More on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching Base First in Focus with me, Shaheen Jurampati. We are joined by the Head of Labour and Human Resources at the Institute of Policy Studies, Nisha Arunatillaka. Nisha, before the break you said we have the wrong people doing the wrong jobs. Define this statement that you made.
Because take a typist for example. If you join a company And because of technology, no one needs a typist anymore. So unless that company can either train that person to become a computer operator or lay off that worker and get a computer operator, you are stuck with that typist. So unless there is constant training and movement of people, the company will be stuck with the typist who is not able to do this work with new technology, and that will hold back the company. So this is what I said, unless you allow people to move around and retrain and get better new skills, you will have the whole labor market being stagnant.
Now obviously from what you're saying, I'm believed to understand that this working environment obviously caters more to the younger generation. So now to the much older generation who are not much tech savvy, and you know what I'm saying, what plan could be initiated for that generation? What could be sorted out for them?
So actually in other countries there are training programs for older workers also. But if you have a system where you are getting constantly trained, then when you are older also you are skilled. At the moment, because you are not getting training, once you enter a job or limited training, then you become obsolete when you get older and older. So, but in an environment where you have lifetime training, older workers need not be less skilled. But in an environment like today, you can have training for older workers, which you don't see much in Sri Lanka, because all the training is geared towards the younger people who are just coming out of school.
Let's talk about female labor participation. Sri Lanka ranked 126th out of 138. Why has Sri Lanka scored so low in these rankings?
Because our female labor force participation rate is around 36%. So that is quite low actually.
In your publication here, I have an excerpt saying, it reads, like for many other countries, the majority of household responsibilities and childcare activities are the responsibility of females in Sri Lanka. This is a case in spite of the economic participation of females. Elaborate on this statement.
So actually a recent study was done by Ramani Gunathilaka. She found that on average females spend about 6 hours doing household chores like cooking, cleaning, looking after children. So on top of doing that, if you have to also go to work, then it's a bit difficult. So they want to work closer to where they live, and also they look for more flexible kind of work opportunities. So you find because of that, if there are, especially in the rural areas, when there are no job opportunities close by, they prefer to either do agricultural work or go for self-employment, because they have to balance the household work with the market work.
Well, it is, I think, while it is accepted that a female should take care of the house and do general chores, is a social norm more or less. So how do we move out of this social norm? And if we do, there has to be someone to look after the kids, if at all. So how do we move on to that portion of the development process?
So what the other countries have done is actually provide good quality, affordable childcare for one. And also you have more males participating in the household work there as well. And the other thing is technology, because because now if you look at the rural areas, still households are using fuel wood for cooking. Now that is itself very time consuming, and to get water, if you have to go far, that is time consuming. So if there is electricity and easier cooking facilities, fridges, that will actually reduce the household, the time that you have to spend doing household chores. So that can also help improving infrastructure, general infrastructure.
Well, some might argue that most of the job opportunities which can sustain or suffice for that kind of luxury, if I may say, for the rural areas, most of the job opportunities exist most often not in the western province rather than the other rural provinces. So how can the government tackle these problems as well?
Yeah, so you have to find jobs that are good jobs in the rural areas. I mean, that is very important. I think promoting entrepreneurship and getting people to start up small businesses. These kind of small activities can generate a lot of jobs. And if you have better infrastructure, better roads and electricity, things like that, I think it's easier for workers to work from rural areas and connect to the markets in urban areas.
Nisha, when compared with other regional countries, how does Sri Lanka fare in female labour participation?
So compared to South Asian region, of course, we are not doing very well. Only India is lower than us. So 35-36% is not very good at all. But I must say, this is actually mainly among the low-skilled workers. If you look at highly skilled females, their labour force participation rate is almost very similar to that of males. Say, for example, if you look at those with degrees, 83%, nearly 84% of the females participate in the labour force, and about for that's statistic for males is 85%. So there is not much of a gap. It is actually about among the lower educated, lower skilled workers only there is a big gap between the female and male labour force participation. So any policy looking to improve female labour force participation should look at the lower skilled workers.
Well, Nisha, hold on to the thought. We're crossing over another short commercial break. Stay with Biz First in Focus. We're talking about investing in human resources and reforming the labour market with Nisha Arunadilaka, the head of labour and HR at the Institute of Policy Studies. You're watching Biz First in Focus. Be right back. Welcome back to Biz First in Focus. I'm Shahin Jurampati, and we're talking about investing in human resources and reforming the labour market with Nisha Arunadilaka, the head of labour and human resources at the Institute of Policy Studies. We left off with talking about education. How does education impact the labour force in Sri Lanka? Nisha, like I said, how does education impact? Is education affecting, the level of education affecting our labour market in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, in terms of female labour force participation, for example, the more educated you are, more you are in the labour market. So education helps. So I think if you can improve education, you can bring more females in the labour market, and also for everybody that can increase productivity, and that could be a solution for the skill mismatch in the labour market. So it is a solution for a lot of the problems in the labour market.
But then again, Nisha, like you said at the beginning of this interview, most youth, if you look at the current generation, ranging from 18 to 25, most of these young people, the moment they finish school, they leave the country for higher education, and most often than not, they remain in those countries to pursue in their lives further on. So this also causes a problem to Sri Lanka, doesn't it?
Actually, more than that, it is the length of time they stay in education. Now, if you look at 18, you said 18 to 25, right? Until about 20, youth are in school, because you do your A-levels when you are 19, and you don't get the results until almost till you are 20. So you lose good 2 years of labour market activity. In most countries, by 18, you are done with schooling. So you can enter the labour market, but here it takes 2 more years. So those are not there in the labour market. And if you go to university, you don't enter the labour market until you are 25.
Exactly. This is where it draws debate, Nisha.
Yes.
Now you said education is important to the labour force.
Yes.
However, most students get misled by this notion. They study, like you said, they study till their late 20s. Right, and the moment they come out of education, they expect a massive salary, and when they don't, they harp on it and they go on protest most often than not. So where do we draw the line here? How do we resolve this issue again here?
So I think one thing is, if you enter university, system should change so that you are out of university by 22, maximum 23. And also the people who come out of the university, they shouldn't try to look for jobs in the public sector, but try to find jobs or create jobs, start your own businesses, and then everybody will have jobs. but because partly because of the distortions of the labor market, people who come out of education, they want to go into the public sector, but but that creates inefficiencies in the education market also, because if you are guaranteed a job in the public sector, even when you are in the universities, you don't have an incentive to study well and gain skills, because you know that you will get this job. So it lot of problems are created when you I think especially the graduates who come out, because those are the most talented individuals in the country. They should be able to create jobs or find jobs. They shouldn't look for jobs in the public sector.
Nisha, at the beginning of this interview, you spoke about Sri Lanka's severance pay system. First, could you define what exactly the severance pay system is and how it affects Sri Lanka, and what is the severance pay system operational in Sri Lanka?
Okay, severance pay system is actually, that was introduced, it's a form of income security for workers, because if you are laid off, then you don't have a salary, and there is income insecurities. So a lot of the countries, to provide income security to the workers, they provided income security through job security, providing jobs, so guaranteeing a person a job. But when this happens, all the distortions I spoke about earlier, the whole labor market becomes distorted, because then people don't move from job to job, because of this job security, people tend to stay in jobs for a long period. So this OECD countries is called flex security. What they do is, they don't provide job security, but through the unemployment insurances, they provide income security.
Nisha, what kind of urgent reform does Sri Lanka need in terms of the severance pay system?
I think first of all, it needs to be clear cut. It must be easier for firms to hire and fire workers. And at the same time, the compensation amount is a bit high. But more than that, I think it is the easiness of hiring and firing workers. That needs to be reformed, so that that is not holding back companies from changing the labor force with the changes in the market. So I think, yes, that should be
Well, thank you very much, Nisha, for joining us on the program. This has been Biz First in Focus. Well, we were joined by Head of Labour and HR at the Institute of Policy Studies, Nisha Arnothalekam. Two very important things. We have the wrong people doing the wrong jobs. And if you're just starting your job, don't get too comfortable. If what Nisha says is correct, you're in trouble. Well, this has been Biz First in Focus. I'm Shahin Jurampati. See you next week.